Welcome to the CSBP Fertilisers Grow Better podcast, sharing knowledge with growers on leading crop nutrition, sustainable agriculture and other issues impacting the agricultural industry.
G'day everyone, welcome to another episode of the CSBP Grow Better podcast. My name's Grey Johnston and I'm very pleased to be joined today by Nic Pattrick, Production Superintendent at CSBP Fertilisers. Nic, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Very pleased to have you on. Now we're going to talk all things local manufacture today, but before we get into that, Nic, can you just tell us about yourself, your background, your role and how you came to CSBP?
I studied chemical engineering, and in Western Australia at the time, you know, the clear pathway for a lot of chemical engineers is either in the oil and gas or the mining sector. But I just had a way more interest in kind of advanced manufacturing. So, you know, taking different raw materials and using, you know, reaction chemistry to create a high value product. And so I, you know, was very interested in Wesfarmers Chemicals, Energy and Fertiliser at the time. And obviously that's what CSBP sits within. So I was really fortunate back in 2016 to get an opportunity working in the ammonium nitrate business, and then naturally kind of transitioned to fertilisers from there, and joined the fertiliser production team. So in that team, we operate three different operational assets. So it's the flexi and manufacture, storage and dispatch, the superphosphate manufacturing plant, and the granulation plant. So for about 3 years, I did a role which was called what we call plant owner role. So that's the process engineer that looks after the granulation plant. And then kind of as years went by, just a bit of right place, right time, was fortunate enough to become the production superintendent, which looks after those three operational assets.
So a big job then, producing fertiliser that growers who'll be listening to this podcast rely on to grow their crops every year. Tell us a little more about your team and what you guys get up to and what you're focused on at the moment.
Love talking about the team because they're just so passionate about making fertiliser, and their kind of core vision is that they want to make sure that they make the product on time to the highest possible quality without hurting anyone and without any environmental impact. So the team's made up of you know, depending on the time of the year, between 25 and 32 process technicians and what we call process group leaders that look after specific shifts, 3 to 4 engineers, and then an operations supervisor. So because there's so much passion in that group, a lot of my job isn't about creating a nice vision for everyone and kind of trying to motivate them towards that vision. They're all like, I've got guys that watch YouTube videos of how to run a granulator. Like, they generally love it. So a lot of what my job is around enablement. So is kind of finding the right systems, the right tools, the right priorities to help guide them in delivering that vision. So that is kind of where I really see my role. And you know, the more functional aspects of it is a lot around you know, kind of leading safety processes and also making sure we make the right product at the right time, because there's a lot of different things we can make, and it's making sure that we're making the one that's most important for the customer at that, you know, particular time of the year.
So that leads us nicely, I guess, to the core topic of today's discussion, which is our local manufacture capability and our local manufacture program. The fertilisers business has been manufacturing fertiliser in some way, shape or form in WA for over 100 years, since about 1910. Can you tell us, Nic, what are the values of local manufacturing and why is it important that we manufacture here in WA?
I could talk for ages about each different product and why it does, but you know, if I was kind of breaking it down, I really focus on reliability of supply, the quality of the product, and just the connection to market and what that delivers for us. So, you know, if we talk about reliability, you know, great example was last year when you know, the war in Ukraine really kind of restricted the supply of Flexion globally. And, you know, we were able to leverage our, you know, internal business offerings and be able to procure some ammonium nitrate and meet a potentially 80,000 tonne deficit in the market by having that at local manufacture capacity. And if we pick out a month in the peak of the production season, the number of you know, procurement meetings that we're having to kind of understand different materials we could or couldn't put into the plant to kind of deliver an outcome for a customer, that is extremely exciting, and that's the value that I think the production facilities provide. It just is a lot more options really for dealing with quite complex supply chain situations. So that's the first aspect. The next aspect is really about quality. So if you want to import a product, say you want to import 30,000 tonnes of a complex NPK or MPS product, you know, the likelihood when you collect that in April, that's probably been made way back in November, December to allow for that procurement timeframe. It's a good odds if you pick up a product in April from us that it's been the bulk of that's been made in the last 2 months. And what we also can do is look at the different breakdowns of products that we have and try to make the best shelf life products early. So we start, while we're running right now, we're making some of the better shelf life products. And as the shelf lives get poorer, we make them closer to the collection window. So that's kind of the proactive aspect. But then on a reactive sense, we're checking a stockpile every day. So every 1,000 tonnes that we make, we're checking that stockpile and verifying that it's of a good enough quality. When it comes to, if someone does experience a poor quality product, we have the ability to genuinely investigate that and actually action that, or even reprocess the product itself. So that kind of is where I see it from a quality perspective. And then connection to market is, again, we've got people manufacturing product that actually have a genuine connection to the industry and the people the customers, they really do care about, how's the customers going? What's their harvest looking like? What's the opinion of the quality of the product? So I think that's a big kind of staple to start with, like knowing that people actually care. And then the fact that we can mold our product offerings to what the market needs. And as I was saying to you before, we've been in situations where over the last 5 years, every year there's a different product that we're making in the granulation plant to meet a different demand from the customer. And I think that's extremely exciting. It's definitely something that I get excited about.
So you touched on the granulation plant there, and as I understand, that's the plant that is making our balanced NPK compound fertilisers. Can you tell us a little bit more about the workings of that plant and what's going on at the moment?
The granulation plant is what we call an agglomeration granulation plant. So there's two types. So you can have an agglomeration, which is basically sticking particles together and making them nice and hard. And then an accretion granulation plant is where it's basically like creating a granule using an onion skin effect. So you just keep on coating it and coating and coating it. So what we do in an agglomeration granulation plant is, say we want to make an NPK or S product, we take the raw materials. So that could be sulfate of ammonia, potassium chloride, potassium sulfate, and MAP. And then we want to stick them together. And there's a whole heap of inner workings of how we stick them together, but that's what really creates your Agras's, your MacroPros, and your K-Tills from there.
And that plant has been in operation for some time now?
Yeah, so the mid 1970s was when it first started. So some of our drums have been there for that long. So we kind of definitely comprehend the day that we have to change that out. But long history there and not uncommon to have employees that have made complex compound fertilisers for 30 years, 35 years. So a lot of knowledge.
I talked about the manufacture history of CSBP, which really dates back to 1910. And in those days, we were making superphosphate, and you're still making superphosphate today.
Yeah, so the Kwinana superphosphate plant is still running. So we kind of mix around when we're going to make the superphosphate, depending on market conditions. But still makes somewhere between 100 and 140,000 tonnes annually out of that facility. And it used to have different shapes and sizes of super plants across, Albany, Esperance, Bunbury, and Geraldton. So again, a real large knowledge base in terms of how to make the best quality super and reliably.
And can you talk to us a little bit about the raw materials that go into each of those processes?
Yeah, so if we start with the super plant, it's really, it takes phosphate rock. So the core goal of the super plant is to take phosphate rock, which is insoluble P, and turn it into a soluble P that is able to be handled and distributed. So what that means is it needs to be a relatively good sizing distribution so it can be spread well across a crop, and obviously our customers will know all about that. So what we do is we take the rock, we crush it up, because to really turn that insoluble P to a soluble P, we need to react it with sulfuric acid. And if we don't crush it up enough, basically that reaction won't occur. Then we send it through a mixer where those processes occur, roll it into a granulator. So a granulator is a pretty common piece of equipment in any fertiliser plant, and then screen it before it heads out to the shed. There's a whole heap of, if you talk to a process engineer that's looking after it today, there'll be a whole heap of inner workings of different things that they'll analyse to maximise the quality. But the core goal is really to make a product that takes insoluble P to soluble P, and it's easy to handle.
And you touched before in terms of the raw materials you might use to produce a compound fertiliser in the granulation plant. What are the other types of things you'd use and be using to produce our balanced NPK range?
So it's kind of like you talk about the kind of the commodity imported products or the things we get from neighbouring businesses and things like that. So the key for any of them is monoammonium phosphate. So your MAP. then your sulfate of ammonia, your potassium chloride, and your sulfate of potash. That basically covers a pretty large portion of what we manufacture. So they're all the solid raw materials. Then from there, there's your liquid and gas raw materials. So to make a good compound fertiliser, you need sulfuric acid, and then you need ammonia. Yeah. So we're fortunate we've got a Haber Bosch plant on the front end of our facility in a neighbouring part of our business. So that feeds ammonia directly into our process, and sulfuric acid comes from a nearby business as well.
So you get all those raw materials, Nic. How does it then happen? You talked a little bit around an agglomeration plant. What is that agglomeration? Can you talk us through the process?
The best way to focus is to really look at the granulator itself. That's where all the magic happens. So, you obviously can't just take two particles and just throw some water at it and think it's going to turn into a nice hard granule. So that's where the sulfuric acid really comes in. So what we do is we take sulfuric acid and we mix it with monoammonium phosphate and some water, and it makes a nice acidic solution. What we do then is we take whatever raw material we want. So say I want to make my favourite product, which is MacroPro. We'll take sulfate of potash and MAP, and we'll throw that into the granulator. We'll throw this acidic solution onto it. If we just throw the acidic solution at it, it would come out as a great big sloppy mess, and it wouldn't form any granules. So that's where the ammonia comes in. So what we're doing is we're synthesising ammonia. We pass ammonia into our granulator in a real nice steady fashion. So what we do is we have these sparge injectors that go into it, and these sparges slowly push ammonia through the granulator. So it goes from being quite a sticky granule that kind of latches onto everything, and then before you know it, at the end, it will be nice and hard because it's basically taken the sulfuric acid and neutralised it. All that happens, there's a lot going on in one granulator, so it doesn't happen perfectly the first time. So what we do from there is the goal is to take a lot of the water out of the granule and to cool it down. Also separate out the smaller products from the bigger products. So that kind of takes you through the whole process flow from there. So what we do is we take it through a gas-fired burner, which is a great big rotating drum. Then we go through a set of screens, which I think is probably the most underrated part of the plant. It's actually really, really critical for making good quality fertiliser. We take out the small product, and then we keep the big product is effectively what we do. The big product goes to a cooler, gets coated with some wax, which protects the granule from forming into real hard cakes, and then it gets thrown out into the shed. Because it's particularly in an agglomeration granulation plant, because it doesn't all occur perfectly the first time, there's a recycle ratio. So what we do is for every 3 tonnes that's rotating around, 1 tonne is taken out as fresh product, and the rest goes back into the mix.
So lots going on there, Nic. Can you, I guess, for those of us listening on at home, and not everyone's watching on the video, but paint us a picture of what it is we're actually talking about for some people who haven't had the opportunity to visit the Kwinana granulation plant. You started us where you were mixing sulfuric acid with SMAP, or monoammonium phosphate. Where's that happening, and can you try and paint a picture for our listeners of what does the plant look like, and what is the physical nature of the asset in which this is all happening?
What it starts out is a great big front end loader picking up the raw material from a pile. Then the plant is highly elevated, so it's about 8 stories high with multiple elevators that take the product from the ground up to chutes that then feed it into large rotating drums, particularly is the thing that's most notable. So if I'm talking about the granulator, that will be probably 10 metres long and 4.5 metres in diameter. The dryer will be 25, 30 metres long and the same diameter, and just conveyors everywhere. So you look at it and it's just, you wonder how you can pack that much equipment into one plant. Makes it very, very hard to maintain because when you've got one work group up here, you've got another one there and another one there, and the interfaces become very challenging.
And then safety must be a real concern there as well?
Yeah, so I think definitely for us, we wouldn't classify as a major hazard facility, which a lot of our other businesses are, but we are feeding in lower volumes the same hazardous materials. So we're feeding ammonia, which is very toxic, feeding natural gas into our burners, which obviously can cause explosions, and sulfuric acid is obviously extremely hazardous if it gets on someone's skin. So that's kind of the environment that the technicians are thinking about, those sort of hazards all the time. And because we're feeding effectively a salt into our plant all the time, so potassium chloride in particular, corrosion is a really challenging aspect of our jobs. It's really about managing dropped objects, whether it's a corrosion-related dropped object or people completing maintenance work and tooling can fall to different levels. So that it's the inherent hazardous nature of our facility that we focus a lot on, and also just a lot around when we're maintaining equipment, that's when a lot of the hazards present themselves as well.
And are you operating year round?
So 24/7 when we are running. So our shift pattern will be, one shift comes in for 12 hours and the next shift comes in for 12 hours overnight. A typical season would see us running the super manufacturing plant from roughly July through to November. And then the granulation plant will start in October and run through to about June. More recently, we've run those two plants at the same time, which means both start in October and the super plant finishes in February and the granulation plant in June. And that was really to deal with some kind of the high phosphate rock market that everyone else is experiencing in phosphate prices. We also are exposed to high levels of risk there. So we adjusted our operating model to try to mitigate some of that risk, that pricing risk.
And so you're producing product in Kwinana that may then get dispatched from Kwinana or from our country works?
So like right now we're making Agras Extra, which is a product that large volumes go out to our country works. So we have what we call like an interworks transfer program, which is trucks sending it all around the state. Some of the products are primarily dispatched out of Kwinana, and the biggest goal that we have most of the time is that when we're spilling something, we want to move it as few times as possible. So there's a lot of my time and a lot of the dispatch team and storage and dispatch team's time is focused on how can we limit the number of times we pick that product up, because you can do as much effort as possible in the plant, but if you move a product 6 or 7 times, even if it's the best quality product in the world, it's still going to break down and generate dust from there.
Nic, I'm sure our customers and our growers out there will be really happy to hear that we've got someone so committed to the team and to the process, and with such a strong knowledge of the process out there, looking after their interest in manufacturing some really high quality fertiliser for them. So thank you for sharing that with us, and I certainly found it fascinating. I guess you talked about you just getting into the manufacturing program for the season. What's next on the agenda?
Real big for us is just, when as I said before, you really want to try to make your better shelf life products early. So that's what we do now. We just we can make product at 1,400 tonnes a day, but everyone knows that come April we'll probably be selling or dispatching product at 5,000 or more tonnes a day, particularly for the complex compound fertilisers. So a lot of what it is really just getting ahead of the curve. So we will make some Agras Extra products in the next for probably the next 2 weeks, and then we'll start swinging to MacroPro, because MacroPro stores really, really well, before we start to transition to our K-Till based products, which inherently in their chemical makeup are poorer shelf life products.
And is it a lot of effort every time you have to change your production run? What do you have to do to reconfigure the plant?
It's only a couple of products really require reconfiguration. The kind of common turnaround on a product change, maybe 6 to 8 hours. A lot of that work is at our discretion if we want to do it. So particularly solids handling plants like ours, there is some routine cleaning that's required, or some routine maintenance is relatively regular. So what we do is we tend to make those product changes when we want to do some work. Particularly, the maintenance team or the production team want to do some cleaning or some maintenance work.
And we touch wood out of the COVID window for West Australia at the moment. Did that challenge pose you any particular challenges during the last couple of production seasons?
Yeah, when you've got a 24/7 roster, it was very, very challenging. I think when you're talking about the number of people that you could have available to come to work decreasing by 30% or whatnot, that's like very, very significant. So absolute credit to the team. That, as I said, that one of the keys is that when they need to come to work and you say, hey, look, we're really struggling to get a body to come to work, they move everything. The heaven and earth. My team is just that committed to delivering for the customer, and I think that's something you can't create elsewhere. Again,
I hope our listeners and our growers out there are happy to hear about the dedication of the team that are moving heaven and earth to get them product and get them, in particular, our locally developed range, which we're very proud of at CSBP Fertilisers. So you mentioned, Nic, that you're moving into a production run of MacroPro, which I understand is a sulphate of potash based product. Are you going to be using some of the West Australian local produced sulphate of potash in that production run?
Yeah, we will we've got some of that in the shed right now, so we will have our first cup. We've tried it before, and we don't, from those trials, we don't see any issues coming up. MacroPro is a really great product to granulate. It comes out with great moisture, really quite a big product. So the key for us is really just making sure with that transition to larger volumes of that Kalium product that we don't compromise at all on our product quality, because if you're talking about what's the number one product we always want to make sure is the best quality is MacroPro, because its inherent chemical makeup means that it is very, very high quality and low dust generation. So we've got to make sure that we don't make it hot, high moisture, and of a good size, so that the customers really get the bang for the buck when they're investing in that product.
So you've touched on quality a few times, Nic, during our conversation. What is it in particular that you and the team look to make sure that you're maintaining and optimising that product quality?
There's a few aspects to it. The first is obviously the chemical makeup needs to be right. So there's a lot of energy that just goes to making sure that your MP and K or your MP and S is within the appropriate range. But then from there, there's four things actually, but kind of two. One's high and one's low. What we talk about is we always want to have the lowest possible moisture and the lowest possible temperature when it exits our plant. So the reason for that is when you take a granule and you put it out into a stockpile, and if it's got high moisture and high temperature, and the product comes out at 55 degrees and the ambient temperature is 25 degrees, all that happens is it sweats. It pushes that moisture to the outside, and what that does is it takes fertiliser salts and deposits it on the outside of the granule, and that's where your dust comes from. And then what we want to increase is we always want to increase the hardness of the product, and we always want to increase the size. And a lot of that really comes down to making sure your chemical makeup is in line. So if often what you'll see is if you have too high potassium or too low potassium, or we obviously operate within ranges, that can have a significant impact on the hardness. And then it also comes back to how much ammonia you actually put into the granulator. So we monitor pH really, really heavily because that's an indicator of good granule hardness. And then size just comes down to making sure our screening systems are working really, really efficiently.
So Nic, I've been fascinated to learn about your world and about the production facilities and team we have at CSBP Fertilisers. If there are listeners out there who are interested in staying up to date with our manufacturing program, what would you recommend?
So I think the first step would be to talk to your CSBP account manager. They could definitely give me a call or get a bit of insight into what we're doing. And then if you're particularly interested, and sometimes I can talk all I want about what a production plant looks like, you might just want to come and actually have a look, and we're always open to those opportunities. We'd want to obviously coordinate it in some way, but if you wanted to talk to them about the opportunities to come out on site and have a good look at the facility, I'm sure we could work with you on that.
Really generous offer, Nic. You've got a couple of plants running at the moment. You've got a bit going on, but thank you for making that offer to our listeners. And I can speak from experience that it's certainly a fascinating thing to look at, and really great to hear Nic and his team talk about the ins and outs of fertiliser manufacture. Nic, great to chat to you today about our local manufacturer and our locally developed product range, and to hear about all the things you and the team are doing to make sure we're delivering product with that great quality, well suited for West Australian growing conditions, based on the capability that we have within our business, both nutritionally and then from a procurement and most importantly a production perspective. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you all out there for joining us today on the CSBP Grow Better podcast. Remember to jump onto our socials at CSBP Fertilisers, or slide into our DMs with any suggestions you've got for the show. But until next time, I've been Grey Johnston, been joined by Nic Pattrick. See you later. Goodbye.
Thanks for tuning into another episode of the CSBP Grow Better podcast. For more information about CSBP, please visit csbp-fertilisers.com.au or connect with us on social media at CSBP Fertilisers on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn.